Formula One goes from a track that had slow speed corners and hard braking zones to a complete opposite and a one-of-a-kind in Spa. This track offers a variety of straights, high-speed corners. You do have to brake hard in the very last sector, but it's not the key component to the Spa circuit. We just saw some big upgrades in Hungary. We will see teams like Mercedes and Ferrari bringing upgrades here that we're going to go over. Red Bull just also introduced its biggest upgrade that's specifically for high downforce, but there are talks about Spa for the team as well. We know the team's characteristics when it comes to strengths and weaknesses and on what circuit each team should be good. Let's see if the upgrades can help out for Spa, and let's go over them. Right before getting into that, I wanted to thank you guys for support on the channel. Outstanding per usual, and it makes my day to see what you guys are commenting, and I love interacting with you guys. That's another big thing about this channel that I always wanted to be a thing. It's part of the reason why I do it, but if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. It helps push the channel and it helps me out a lot. So thank you for that, but let's get into the upgrades coming to the Spa GP. So far in our 2024 season, this is a great graph showing you from F1 Big Data what each team has brought to each circuit and how many of those parts. Right now, the leader, pretty much with up/downgrades, is your Aston Martin team, and at the very bottom is Williams, who since Monaco has not brought anything. This has a lot to do with how the season started in 2024. They barely could get the car out. There are supposed to be upgrades that were brought to Hungary. It seems like it was delayed. They only had an engine cover spec there, but clearly that's been used before. As you can see, it wasn't documented down. But there is a possibility, I don't have confirmation on that, at least from my sources, that we could see an upgrade here in Spa. Sauber was one of the lowest teams, but they brought a huge package here, about 9 different parts, and completely revised their car to now a B spec, and Aston has brought parts as well. But let's now get into what's confirmed for the Spa GP and which teams will be bringing those parts. Specifically, let's talk about Aston, who's fresh off of some big upgrades in Hungary. I think we can conclude that this was finally a GP where they actually got some progress out of their upgrades, both confirmed from Alonso and Lance. Now, while their race pace wasn't the best, in qualifying they were good, and this GP had all the signs of showing that it would be a very weak track for the AMR 24. As I talked about before, there were rumors of this B-Spec car. This essentially did revise everything in the car from the bottom up, with the different floor revisions to the halo and diffuser to give the car a better balance. But as Dan Follows has stated, these aren't upgrades to actually give performance on the car. The handling on the car has been so poor ever since pretty much Imola, so they've pretty much had to go back on their progress to make the car actually drivable. They're losing a lot of grip in slow speed corners, which used to be a big strength of theirs, and overall the tires in the rear are just getting chewed up in the race, which makes the job for Alonso and Lance only a defensive one and not an offensive race. There are supposed parts that are supposed to be a complete revision to the side pod, which has been talked about by the team members, but let's see if it's brought here, because as I've said, even with it being confirmed, sometimes these upgrades get delayed, and it's possible they could wait for after the summer break just to see if the new parts they brought in Hungary actually helped out for a track like Spa, where I do think they will have a better time out than they did in Hungary. Another team bringing upgrades here, which is confirmed, it's supposed to be something very helpful for the team. Upgrade or update, whatever you want to call it, it's something that's very needed. The Ferrari car brought an upgrade in Hungary that was supposed to help with the bouncing issue they currently have. In Hungary, this problem was never going to be very significant. As Carlos stated, maybe turns 4 and 11 is where they saw bouncing, and he actually confirmed in the race and in qualifying the car did bounce, but it wasn't as significant as they thought it would. So this update did help them, and where we saw this revision was actually on the bottom of the floor. They took out the kicks that were on the back of the car towards the diffuser. This is a very complicated piece, and I've stated this before in a video covering the underfloors for the cars. If you don't know what you're doing with the kick like Red Bull did in 2022, then it could be a downgrade like it was for the Ferrari car rather than an upgrade. If the same problems persist in Spa, this car will not be able to run at all, and it could be their worst track of the year. Bouncing in Spa is the worst thing that can happen, because if the FIA checks out that floorboard and they see that you're bouncing, it'll definitely be a disqualification for both the Ferrari drivers. Going up La Rouge, you're definitely going to bounce, but even going through most of the corners in Spa, with them being high speed and medium speed, there will be some type of bouncing in the car, which the Ferrari has struggled with. This upgrade coming to the car is supposed to be in the suspension to actually help with the revision that was already done onto the floor. This is a very important GP for them, because if they can't solve this, they'll have to wait till 2025. So far we have confirmation in 2025 that the actual Ferrari car should have a pull rod front suspension and a push rod rear suspension, which is the opposite of what they have right now, which the car currently isn't running. It's on the McLaren and the Red Bull. We all talked about this being a deficiency for the season, and the way they started, it didn't seem like it would be. But now, as the cars are coming closer together, it's clear to see that that suspension setup is the best. Now, while Mercedes doesn't have it, they do have a different front and rear suspension layout than the Ferrari does. For the Mercedes, it's a push-push. For the Ferrari, it's a push-pull. Quickly before going into the last team with confirmed upgrades, I wanted to talk about the Red Bull upgrades that came in Hungary. We will see them revert back to what Perez was running in Hungary for Spa, because that is their lower downforce spec now for the car. The engine cover that came there is now only supposed to be ran on the higher downforce tracks. It's clear that this upgrade didn't really work, and Max has already said the car feels super similar in both specs and it really hasn't made the change they've expected it to. As the season comes closer and closer, these visual/aero parts will be seen less and less on the car, and we can expect more mechanical upgrades like we see on the Mercedes car. Right now, it seems like they're a bit stuck with this design. It could be with the loss of Adrian that's definitely hurting them. And they've got a big task on their hands considering this upgrade was supposed to be a game changer, and they've literally changed most of the car just so they can have a good car for those higher downforce tracks. Spa on paper looks to be one of Red Bull's best tracks based off of the RB20's characteristics. Last team with confirmed upgrades coming here is the Mercedes, that has already announced it will have a double upgrade before the F1 summer break. The small upgrade we saw on the car was a rear deflector, which is supposed to improve the rear downforce by reducing the local flow losses, but it's not a huge performance gain. When it comes to W15's aerodynamic body, it hasn't been revised too much except for the front part of the car. The rear wing's gotten a couple of revisions, but the actual front wing itself has gone through a complete change from the beginning of the season. From James Allison's words, this is supposed to be a big package. Hungary obviously wasn't that, but let's see for Spa, because it's been a weak track in these new regulations in 22 and 23, and knowing how Saudi went with that rear wing that they had that could possibly be used in Spa, I do expect some visual changes here to the Mercedes before we get into our summer break. What are your guys' thoughts going into Spa? Do you think we will see somebody tackle Max here? Because it's been a domination in 22 and 23, literally from P14 winning and then beating out Checo in 2023. I don't expect a different outcome, honestly. I'll talk about it more in my predictions and preview video tomorrow, but it's hard to count out Red Bull even with the problems they're currently having. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.